There you are now. Very good morning to you. You're welcome along to Wednesday mornings, OTBAM. It is Wednesday.
Correct, 100%.
These bank holiday weeks when you've got a day off, it's like, they're amazing, but it's hard to catch up.
Is it really worth it for the confusion around days?
I was thinking, wouldn't a 4-day week be amazing?
It would be, but then you get into the way of thinking, wouldn't a 3-day week be amazing?
I don't know, 4 you wouldn't be gready.
Oh,
There'd be at least a decade or a generation before everybody would get greedy and go, hang on a second, why are we working more than we're living?
There's only one thing the history of human nature has taught me, is that if you give anybody an inch, how much do they take? They take a full mile, and that's what would happen. It would just be a spiral of, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a 0-day a week and we just kind of went around like cavemen all day, every day?
Speaking of cavemen, your fellow Kerry football supporters have been exposed for a pretty horrific small coterie of them, a small anonymous coterie of them. You spent a lot of time last night in the company of Eamon Fitzmaurice.
Yeah, Fitzmaurice was up in Dublin last night. He's probably in a plane somewhere at the moment on the way to Naples or somewhere on the Amalfi Coast. So before he kind of went back to the hotel last night, he just gave me a good bit of his time and chatted about everything. Naturally, Kerry fans was one of the big things that came up, and the letters, the anonymous letters that were mentioned in the aftermath of the game on Saturday, but didn't really get into a lot of depth in the press conference because there wasn't that much time. He just stepped down and all that. And we got into a bit more depth around that last night, and particularly around the nature of some of those letters. Before
we get to the Eamon Fitzmaurice example, so yesterday we were reading in the papers about Anthony Daly. This morning, the Limerick curling manager John Kiley's talking about how he gets them even after he wins games. Last night on the radio, James Horan was talking about how things got particularly serious when he was the Mayo manager, that he actually ended up having to involve the Gardaí.
A serious question. Did you get hate mail? Did you get it from Mayo fans?
Yeah, absolutely. Considerable amounts.
What's a considerable amount?
Well, you know, after defeats, obviously, there's and particularly in championships, it can be very raw for some people. It can be something related to even players from certain clubs that aren't playing, and there's a club member that's disgruntled as a result. So, I think what Dara was saying there as well, with the forums and social media and everything that's there, it's so easy, and it can be, get messages across or get your point across. But it's a different sort of level when it's someone sits down and
writes it with a pen.
Writes a letter and can write some very, very harsh stuff in there. So yeah, it is something that impacts you for sure. Particularly in Eamon's case as well. You have a family, young family, and all that kind of stuff.
And would you?
There's different things that do come into it.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you read it? Like, you get some letters in the post. Again, I'm curious to know how many we're talking. Are we talking 10 a year? Are we talking more than 10 a year? But when you get to the first line or two and you realise where this is going, would you keep reading it?
The first few you would, thinking back and now you would. But I got some of those. I got the police involved in some of those. That's how it brought to the attention of the guards and the appropriate authorities, because that's really what you need to do with some of those.
Because they were threatening.
So some of them would be really concerning, without going into what they were, Joe. But some of them would be very concerning, that you needed to go to the appropriate authorities with it.
Mm. That's mad. That is absolute madness. Like, about a team losing a football match. I understand that your county is important to you, but like, to threaten the well-being of somebody who is a volunteer, who's doing their best, who has literally taken over a situation where you got beaten by Longford in the qualifiers and won every single Connacht Championship match he was in charge for, to write that person a letter going, I'm going to do some damage, or I'm thinking about this, or I'm watching you, or something, whatever it was. It's insanity. Like, we'll talk about this in the papers, but Kieran Shannon has a piece about the Kerry fans. Calm down. Just calm down.
Get a grip is Shannon's term, and it's true. Like, is it just, was there such a preponderance of psychopathic behaviour in a society around Gaelic games? I do wonder. Like, it does seem quite unique. You do have it on kind of a mega scale with some clubs in Britain, you'd imagine, when it comes to professional football.
Arsenal Fan TV.
Yeah, it's not. Well, I guess there's no anonymity to that. Troops actually has to put his face out there.
Fair enough, yeah.
So he has to call Arsene Wenger extinct rather than saying, I'm going to make you extinct, Arsene Wenger, or something like that. So he can't really threaten them. Otherwise, you know, the Met Police would actually go to Troops' apartment and arrest him.
Yeah,
so there is
a fair
that.
point. I guess, though, that's where the level of discourse and conversation is when people are actually willing to kind of do that. So you can imagine what anonymity, the cloak of anonymity, what that gives to people and what they are willing to say. So
completely empowers them. Like, the thing now, just to point out, the thing is we don't know where any of these people are from. We don't know what part of the county they're from, if they're even from the county. Obviously, when it comes to,
well, it's not somebody from Cork right now. Fitzmaurice going, I think you're doing a really bad job there, Eamon.
No, it's clearly like with the Kerry example, it's very obviously somebody from Kerry, given what you often hear in the terraces and stuff like that. So,
well, let's bring you a clip now. So we're going to play you the full Eamon Fitzmaurice interview around about 8:10 this morning. Here's just a clip where he's talking to Owen in the Boar's Head about the nature of the letters that he was getting.
Something that changed this summer was players, and one player in particular that got a letter, and it was more what was in the letter that was what annoyed me, and I felt it was gone too far. That the player was told in the letter to jump off a cliff and take 3 or 4 other players with him that were named in the letter, and I felt that was, you know, going way too far. And as I said, when it's coming at a manager, and the selectors got a few this summer as well, which was no harm for them either to get a touch of it. But when it goes to a player, really, it's gone too far.
Yeah, totally. So that's coming up at around about 8:15 this morning. We're knocking the excuses out of the ballpark for you today. Paddy Considine, the writer, filmmaker and director, is going to join us around about 8:55. He's done an interview with Owen and with Andy Lee about a pretty amazing film. You guys talk a good bit about this.
Yeah, about Journeyman. Like we recorded this with Paddy last week, and it was great to just be there and see the mutual respect that the two have between each other. You can see Considine so delighted that the movie Journeyman gets the seal of approval from Andy Lee in terms of the authenticity of it all, but also just as a human story, as a great kind of display of, I guess, a non-traditional form of masculinity that we often see in cinema. That's a great element of the conversation we have with Paddy Considine as well. So it's great stuff, and a lot of mutual respect there, between Andy and Paddy.
Have a look at the trailer.
When I come back through that door, I'm still going to be champion of the world.
Botti? Ready? Let's get you home.
I want you.
Who is it?
That is your little girl. It's Mia.
Mia.
Do you understand?
No?
And nothing comes close.
We got married here. Do you remember? Do you remember?
Yeah.
You don't, do you?
And I want you.
Where are you, my baby? I feel so alone.
He needs us, mate. Big time.
Feels like there's oceans.
I love you so much.
When you come home, I love you.
I want you.
I need you to come back now.
I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah, I want you.
What are you doing?
Training.
Who are you fighting?
Future.
Feels like there's oceans between you and me.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
All right, let's start with the broadsheet newspapers this morning. We're going to start with the Irish Independent sports section back page for you, and The lead story here is about John Kiley saying that he has a box of hate mail at home, and this is just a common theme emerging now. It turns out that every county seems to have its psychopathic supporters. I haven't played well enough when it's counted at Miss McIlroy. This is Rory McIlroy ahead of the USPGA, the final major of the year. A little bit underwhelming, the level of hype in the build-up to the USPGA. Granted, it is the 4th major and people care about it much less, but this is because it's not on TV.
I was just about to say it. I didn't want to address the elephant in the room here.
Old man Nathan last night tweeting about how he's missing all the golf coverage on Sky. He was like, well, I've got to look at this.
We've got to hand it to Sky Sports. We've got to hand it to Sky Sports when it comes to hyping up these events. They do a bloody good job, and there is no hype around this because 11 Sports have it. Who knows, 11 Sports, when we turn it on this weekend, might have the most amazing montages of all time, and we might suddenly become fans, and it might just require this. But the USPGA, who gives a crap at the moment?
Yeah, it's a fair point. William Marr is the favourite for tip as Wexford players try to keep Davy. This is Davy still hasn't made his mind up yet about whether or not he's staying. Loads of good stuff in that as well. Michael Verney has the John Kiley story from that one. The back page of the Times, they also have the same story. Gary Doyle, their chief sports writer there, saying Kiley hits at anonymous hate mailers. The Limerick boss second to reveal abusive letters. There's now been like a whole kind of slew of intercounty managers who've said that they've had it. Chelsea agrees £72 million Kepa fee. So this is the Athletic Bilbao goalkeeper, who's 23, the sub-goalkeeper for Spain. Kepa Arrizabalaga.
Well done. Not going to dispute that pronunciation.
No, that was terrible. Arrizabalaga. And 80 million quid is the buyout clause. Real Madrid almost bought him for 20 at Christmas. He renegotiated his contract, put the buyout clause in. Chelsea now in desperate need for a goalkeeper urgently because Thibaut Courtois hasn't shown up for training. He's getting completely screwed by the transfer window. And, he's only going to get 80 grand a week.
Is he?
I mean, I'm like, no, you're paying 80 million. Any other player who's getting 80 million is not getting 80 grand a week. They're getting 250 grand a week. I'm getting 250 grand a week, or you can go screw yourselves.
It's yesterday I started to notice kind of a bubbling on Twitter, a couple of think pieces about how the Premier League had changed its ways, about how we weren't going to pay these obscene amounts of money in the Premier League anymore. The teams were just sick of paying over the odds. Lo and behold, those pieces have clearly been blown way too soon because we're into the last 48 hours of the transfer window, and shit's going to get real, I think, is the technical term. There will be crazy fees splashed out like that one.
The Kilmacud Hurling Sevens were launched in Croker yesterday, and Niall Corcoran was doing interviews, and he was asked about Anthony Dalo, and you would have thought that he would have been running for the Waterford job. He's like, no, he wants the Clare job. I haven't talked to him about it, but I'm sure he wants the Clare job. And it's like, well, that's a cat amongst the pigeons. So I'm sure he's delighted this morning waking up going, thanks, man. Training at Kilmacud will be interesting this week. Me Too is the headline on the Examiner. Kiley, I have a box at home too. My wife vets it and doesn't let anything too serious come my way, is the story over the news that John Kiley has hate mail.
That's that's incredible, I find, having a filter there in your own home. Like, a lot of people would say when the mail comes in, obviously it's, I would imagine, very, very harsh and very hurtful, no matter who it's addressed to, no matter who's reading it. But a lot of people would say, I wouldn't mind if it was about me, but if it's about my partner, if it's about my family, whatever it is, that makes it a lot worse. And you can only imagine what John Kiley's wife has to go through when she's reading some of that stuff, to see that written about somebody else, to see it written about her husband. It must be absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, like, I wonder, at some point, does everybody need to collectively say, right, we're going to talk about this week and then we're never going to mention it again? Because if you're the type of person who's writing these letters, then you want to know that they're landing. Sure. You want to know that they're having an impact. You want to know that your little bit of hate, your bit of trolling has had a proper effect on the people involved. And unfortunately it has, and it does. At some point though, do you turn around and go, I'm never mentioning this again. This is our dirty little secret here. And what we will do is we'll send them all to the cops. And as a matter of course, it all gets reported to the cops, and that they are tasked with doing something about it. That's one outcome. Unless the other outcome is that, like, they send them to people like us, and we read them out in funny voices and make fun of the complete clowns who are doing this.
Yeah, hello Whiskers. It's actually written on my screen here yesterday. Joe McMahon letter we read out in yesterday's show. But just like a point, kind of tangentially to that. Like we talk about this with Fitzmaurice in it about like he doesn't name the player who got the letter in the Kerry team, but does say it was like water off a duck's back to that player. And like I often think that a lot of GAA players seem like it's water off a duck's back to them because naturally when they're playing their sport, they're very confident in that arena because they're doing the thing that they are their best, that they're in their best self when they're on the pitch in Croke Park or wherever it is. So you look at that person and you're like, that's a very confident individual, when in actual fact it might not be a confident individual at all. They're just very confident at executing the skills of Gaelic games because they're one of the top 15 players in their counties of doing so. And you don't know what's actually going on behind what is essentially a front, that confident front. Now thankfully this Kerry player is naturally a person who doesn't suffer with any self-esteem issues or doesn't suffer from a lack of confidence, according to Eamon Fitzmaurice, that it didn't get to him too badly. But imagine if it did. I mean, like there is, when you talk about like the young male population in this country and the horrendous mental health situation we find ourselves in this country, and we certainly have over the last 10 years, like this sort of stuff has unbelievably serious repercussions, potentially. And to think that you can target a GAA player because they seem cocky on the pitch or something like that is disgusting, really.
You have to assume that there's mental health issues to the people involved writing the letters as well, that they are...
But that is also true.
Like, anyway, Kieran Shannon is talking about the seriousness with which Kerry people take their football. He quotes a story from Paul Galvin's book.
It's a great one.
Galvin's buying some hardwood flooring after an All-Ireland defeat, 2011, and an old man comes up to him and grabs him by the arm and does nothing. Just kind of stares at him, incoherent, with like tears and sadness. And Gavin's kind of like, okay, it's fine. Tears
forming in his eyes.
But later goes, what the hell was that? That's not normal. That's not like, that's just... And Kieran Shannon's pointing out, like, who the hell in Kerry do you think you are? Come on, calm down. What's wrong with you? Now I'm in two minds about this, right? The Real Madrid fans are notoriously the hardest fans in the world. They'll get the white hankies out after like a 0-0 draw. You know, you could win 3 Champions Leagues like Zidane has done and not be successful enough for the club hierarchy to want to keep you because you haven't won the leagues at the same time. And that level of demand and expectation, that sets the bar so high that consistent excellence is all that they will accept. And there's part of me that wonders if Kerry, having the roughest type of fucking animals as their supporters, is actually one of the things that helps to set the bar. I don't know.
It's an interesting theory. I don't know either. It does seem in recent years it's had the opposite effect, that when you listen to some things that Fitzmaurice has said, something that Mikey Sheehy said earlier in the year about the lack of support, that it's all well and good if the supporters are there and will be behind you up until the final whistle, but like fans streaming out after 50 minutes in Killarney on Saturday night and stuff like that, it does seem that there is a clear divide between the Kerry kind of person and the Kerry supporter.
They wanted to beat the traffic. What were they doing living in Killarney early?
Well, to be fair, traffic is a bit of an issue in the town, but like we also get into this in the piece as well about the divide there.
The furthest they have to go is an hour.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's no need to be leaving that game early. I agree. But the point you make about like that, the Paul Galvin excerpt from his book is rather humorous, and it is kind of an extreme example of if you mention 2011 to anybody from Kerry, like just even the mere mention of 2011, it's like, oh, you some X and Y happened in 2011. You went to that wedding in 2011 or whatever. It's like, don't mention 2011. That really bad thing happened in 2011 when we went to Croke Park and we didn't come away with Sam Maguire. It's just, it kind of comes with some sort of like reminiscent of being in the trenches or something. If you mention to a war veteran what it was like in the Somme, it's like so mentioning to any Kerry person what it was like in Croke Park.
Exactly, you do take it too seriously. You've just compared a defeat in a football match with one of the worst atrocities in human history.
Yes.
And you've done it without irony or without any sense of it. It's like, of course, it's our own personal Somme. Right, so the Irish Times this morning, Patient McElroy feeling upbeat about his chances, but Rory's always upbeat, so show us on Sunday, Rory. That's what we're saying to you now. Confident Woods still fired by major ambition, so there's more from the golf there.
Good takedown from Darragh O'Shea of Galway, actually, in the Irish Times this morning. His column.
Go on.
I might just grab it off you there for a sec. Just a couple of lines. Kevin Walsh, if you're interested, this sort of stuff can go up in your dressing room wall at the weekend. He makes a great comparison here, actually. He's like, they're a bit like the manager fella Robert De Niro fires in the movie Casino. Listen, he says, if you don't know you were being scammed, you're too effing dumb to keep this job. And if you did know, you were in on it. Either way, you're out. That's in reference to Galway against Monaghan at the weekend. He says, somewhere along the way, it looks like they convinced themselves that this was a game that didn't matter. How they could do that when the price of losing as a game against the Dubs is beyond me. I don't think there's any chance that they can turn that mindset around in the space of a week. Maybe the cold, harsh truth of it is that Galway are a decent team, but not All-Ireland contenders. He also says that they haven't solved the Damien Comer problem since he rampaged around Croke Park against Dublin in the league final. He hasn't had too many standout games. A few times on Saturday, you could see him back in the Galway defence trying to stand up Carl O'Connell or Ryan McAnespie and get a tackle in. That's not what Galway should be trying to do. So Damien Comer's a problem for Galway, he says. They're not good enough to win the All-Ireland, he says. And maybe there was nothing to do with the mindset in Salt Hill on Saturday. Maybe they're just not good enough. So strong words from Darragh O'Shea about Galway at the weekend.
That's interesting. I wonder... if Advertise runs in Phoenix, he wins, says Meade. This is the Phoenix Stakes this weekend. Aidan O'Brien has 10 entries and has won it 16 times, but he's not going to win it if Advertise comes over from the UK, according to Martin Meade, who reckons that no matter who Aidan O'Brien runs in that race, he's going to be smacked down by Advertise, which is interesting, because you can't really influence the horse, can you? The horse isn't listening going, uh-oh, and the other horses aren't going, oh, geez, Advertise is coming over, I'm screwed now. Smack talking racing is like, I'd like to see a bit more of this.
Yeah, the trainer should put that on the stable wall and say, listen, look at what these efforts have been writing about you all week.
That'd be class. And then Daydream Believer, Aussie ready to claim a second USPJ title. This is a bit of in and out form so far for Jason Day over the years, so we might talk a bit more about the betting ahead of that. Today is Wednesday, so it'd have to be on tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Big news this morning, back page of the Irish Daily Mail. I want to leave. Pogba has his heart set on a move to Barca. It's an exclusive here by Chris Wheeler. Paul Pogba telling his Manchester United teammates that he's desperate to leave Old Trafford for Barcelona. We'll continue that in just a moment because the Sun also have it. You've also got Thomas lapping it up in Berlin. Thomas Barr qualifying for the final of the 400 metres hurdles with a brilliant run yesterday. He says he can get even better, so watch out for a potential medal tomorrow evening in Berlin. And Limerick boss Kerry also a victim of hate mail. And just to go back to that Pogba story, because they lead with it on the back of the Sun as well. Pogba's shock ultimatum, 200k a week pay rise or let me leave now. Star tells United pals he wants to go. So
how much does he want? 600 grand a week?
He wants £380,000 a week.
So he's only on 180 at the moment?
Only on 180 at the moment.
Deal.
He wants to get closer to United's top earner, Alexis Sanchez.
Come on.
And in fairness, when Alexis Sanchez is your bargaining chip, you've got a pretty good tool there.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise, you'll never guess who's quoted in this piece.
Friends of Paul Pogba?
No, Mino Raiola.
Oh.
So it's one of these sort of last 48 hours of the transfer window story. Manchester United in the back of the Herald as well. Jose's under martial law. Deal for Alderweireld now hangs in the balance. There's a 20-page Premier League pullout in there as well. The Mirror is Jeepers Keepers. Blues smashed the world record with a £71 million deal for Bilbao stopper as AWOL Courtois gets his dream move to Madrid.
Maybe. Maybe. The deal hasn't been done. It's not it's not signed, sealed and delivered.
It looks fairly...
Well, let's wait and see.
The Kepa move or the Courtois move?
The Kepa.
Yeah, it looks pretty...
The representatives are meeting. Let's just wait and see exactly what happens.
I think that one's going to happen.
If they're only offering an 80 grand a week and Alexis Sanchez is getting 380 grand a week, I'm like, no, I want more. Get me more. They're spending 80 million quid in cash to, well, over 10 years or amortization, whatever. But anyway, give me more money.
Yeah, it would be hilarious if he joined and Courtois didn't get his move and suddenly you've got a £71 million goalkeeper on the bench. Or maybe Thibaut Courtois on the bench.
Yeah,
just the worst sort of purgatory.
Thibaut on the bench.
Back page of the Star is €80 million goal Kepa. Chelsea to break world record for rookie Spanish stopper. Kylie says my wife vets any abuse. Pog move plot fury. Just a collection of words. And Relief as Bar makes final. And then a couple of the UK back pages this morning. Asher Smith and Hughes speed to British double. That's the Great Britain sprint duo securing you're both 100-metre titles. So a brilliant day for British sprinting yesterday. And Emirates exit. Kroenke is the victor in Arsenal power game. You've also got Team GB leading the way on the Daily Telegraph. Dazzling Dina. Asher Smith takes European 100-metre gold in British record. And Chelsea break world record for keeper Kepa.
Okay, so one final newspaper for you is the Irish News, and this is Malachy O'Rourke making the case that Tyrone are not the bogey team of Monaghan, despite a lot of evidence to the contrary. Certainly when they get out of Ulster, that's Malachy O'Rourke. I mean, this week is a very tense week, no doubt, for Monaghan because they are up against Tyrone. We've got Marca as well for you. Puertas giratorias.
What does that mean, Ger?
Revolving doors.
How the hell do you know that?
How did I know that?
Puerta means door.
Yeah. So let's bring you some hurling. Paul Browne of the Limerick hurlers, injured ahead of the All-Ireland final. One of the players that Limerick decided to put up in their attempt to dampen down the hype here. He is talking with Máire Treasa-Kelly.
It's a pre-All-Ireland final, and I'm joined here by Limerick's Paul Browne, who, judging by a tweet you sent out a few days ago from a hospital bed, I'd say the chances of you actually playing an All-Ireland final are fairly slim to none.
Yeah, very slim altogether. But look, as I said to the boys the other day, the only difference between me and them now is when you're playing, you're only hitting the balls you hit. But I'm hitting every ball on the sideline now, and to be honest, I'd rather be playing because I'm not able for the watching, you know.
I'm assuming if I was in your shoes, I'd be feeling a little bit of feeling left out, fear of missing out, some FOMO.
No, for the first couple of days I was a bit down, alright, you know, as you would be. Like, I mean, no sports person wants to hear that after tearing their cruise ship, you know. So I was bitterly disappointed for that first few days, but after that, you know, I just had a choice whether to feel sorry for myself or whether to get the show on the road again, you know. So I haven't missed the training yet. I've been at everything so far that the boys have done with. The only difference is I can't tag out and play, so I don't feel left out. The lads have been absolutely fantastic to me over the last number of weeks. They understand exactly my predicament. They've been very good to me. They've included me in everything. Always a friendly text or asking me to go for coffee or to meet up, you know, and keep me going, you know. So they've been absolutely fantastic. I'll be forever indebted to them, what they've done for me for the last 4 or 5 weeks, you know, and it'll continue over the next 2 weeks, no doubt. And even though they're worried about their preparations, I'm still getting messages and asking me how I am and stuff, you know, and how the surgery go and all that. So they're a fantastic bunch of lads, great friends to have.
You have a very positive outlook, but I can only imagine in the hours, especially after knowing you've done this injury to yourself, I mean, you're only human. It must have hurt.
It did, yeah. I remember lying on the ground after it happened with Joe O'Connor, the S&C coach, and I said, Joe, I'm done for here, like, you know, just directly after it happened. And he was like, don't be worried. But you know yourself, like, when it's, you know, the sound, the feeling, like, you know, it's you know what it is, you know it's bad. So I kind of knew. I was very resigned to it very early on, but obviously I suppose when I went up to see Dr. Ray Moran in Santry, and when he confirms it, you know, your heart sinks another little bit, like. But look, I suppose I'm over it now. It's a good few weeks ago now. I've missed the quarter final, the semi final, and I'll miss the final as well. But look, I just want the boys to do the job, you know. It's just out of the blue. It was just the way it happened. It was a bit of a perfect storm. I had the hurling around the fella and just twisted me. Just I planted my leg, you know. So just everything kind of came together. The dry ground, the dry grass was coming as well, you know, and the pitch was a bit dry, you know, as well. So it's just a perfect storm really when it came to the injury, you know. So
I don't want to go too squeamish with it, but thankfully most of us will never know what it feels like to rupture a cruciate. How would you describe it?
It's just a pop and a crunch and just a shudder, and it just kind of goes up it starts in your knee and goes up into your soul nearly, like you feel it, like, you know. But I suppose anyone who's done it knows exactly the feeling, and I suppose it's nearly hard to describe. You don't wish it on anyone, you know. But look, it happens. I mean, there's loads of people. I'm not the first to do it and I won't be the last to do it either, you know. So
how are you preparing for All-Ireland final morning? Because obviously your preparation, you're part of the team, but it's going to be different.
It is, I suppose. I don't have to separate myself from the media or the news stories or watching the games and stuff, you know. I don't have to do that. I mean, even, you know, I looked after tickets and stuff myself, like, you know, whereas usually I'd pass it on to someone else. So, but I don't have to worry about playing, like, you know. So I'm like the supporter with the best seat in the house, really, you know. So look, I'll enjoy it as much as I can. I'll try and be as big a help as I can to the lads over the next couple of weeks. And I suppose it's amazing what you pick up on when you're not togged, you know, and worrying about your own game. You spot a lad who might be down at training or mightn't have had the best session or mightn't have had the best drill, and you just have a word with them and just say, look, I go again, like, you know. And I mean, there's huge competition in our squad, so just trying to drive lads on to be their best and do their best over the next couple of weeks is what I'm kind of focusing on, you know.
Your approach is very mature. I don't know if I'd be that philosophical about it if that was me out of an All-Ireland final, I have to say.
Yeah, but look, I suppose I wanted to stay around with the boys. I wanted to be part of it. I said to the boys there couple of nights ago, I said, if you think I'm hanging on, I am, because I kind of knew what was coming with this group, you know. So I wanted to be a part of that, and I've no part being there if I'm sulking and feeling sorry for myself, like, you know. So I'm not feeling sorry for myself, you know. I just hope we get the job done on the day. That's all I want, you know, as a win for Limerick.
Fair play. That's Paul Browne speaking with more Trust in you, Kelly, ahead of the All-Ireland final from the Limerick hurling camp. Now, Darren is here with some sports news for us. Darren, good morning to you.
Morning, Ger. How are you?
Very well.
Yep, the abuse received by GAA managers, as you've rightly touched on, dominating the discourse this morning. The former Kerry boss, Eamon Fitzmaurice, has revealed the disturbing abuse aimed at some of his players. Well, former Mayo manager James Horan has revealed he got the Gardaí involved after receiving hate mail during his time in charge of the county. While former Dublin Clare boss Anthony Daly was also on the receiving end of a poison pen during his time on the sidelines. He detailed that experience in an interview with the Irish Examiner.
In my Clare time now, God, I used to get letters from a fella in Mayo, an expatriate from Clare, living in Mayo, by God. And I remember saying it one night to Father Harry, who had been manager of the 70s team, is that fella still writing letters? I thought he was dead, he said. You know, and I must have got a letter. And eventually I looked up his name on the phone book and found this kind of uniquely Clare name. Now I could say the name now, but I don't want to, because it's a prominent East Clare name. And I rang and I said, is that John? And he said, it is. Who's this? I said, if you ever send a letter to my house again, I'll personally drive to Mayo and meet you at your front door, kid. I said, because I said, I'm not doing this only for the love of it. But, like, you know, that, yeah, I got loads. I should look at you, be just afraid for your family as well. And I remember, you know, after we drew with Wexford with the Dubs in 13, and, you know, I'm not saying we got a bit of criticism in the Sunday game, we were so poor, and I even said it to the wife and the three girls. I said, if anyone says anything in the stand here now, lads, they don't mean it personally, you know, they just care about Dublin hurling and just try and ignore it. They're not really having a go at your dad. I said the girls are young.
Jesus.
He did say, just reading those quotes, that nothing grim ever happened really at a Dublin game. That the Dublin hurling fans were kind of the best fans he dealt with, and it was obviously it must just be a West Coast thing. It's just the way. It's just that sweet Atlantic air and bad weather and general misery that kind of gets people putting pen to paper. The
Dublin fans knew what they want. They expected. Like, they didn't expect miracles with Daly. I don't think they were thinking he was going to come in here and win a whole heap. I think everything he did exceeded any expectations he has. So it was probably the fact that they didn't want a whole lot. They didn't get on his back too much.
Yeah, it's fair enough.
Tottenham, meanwhile, have stepped up their pursuit of Jack Grealish, a new improved 30 million bid sent to Aston Villa. The 22-year-old midfielder has been in talks with Spurs all summer, but with deadline day looming, he remains at Villa Park. The latest update, Steve Bruce says, there's no decision to be made as the figure that they have tabled is not even making the owners blink. The Republic of Ireland goalkeeper Darren Randolph had a good night last night. He kept a clean sheet as Middlesbrough beat Sheffield United 3-0 in the Championship. Martin Braithwaite, Aidan Flint and Stuart Downing got the goals of the Riverside. A bad night for some of Randolph's Republic of Ireland teammates. David McGoldrick started for Sheffield. Enda Stevens, John Egan also involved. Elsewhere, Nottingham Forest, West Brom drew 1-1. The Chelsea head coach Maurizio Sarri claims he knows nothing about the club's deal to buy Kepa for a world record fee. The Atletico Bilbao goalkeeper is set to be closing in on a move to the Premier League side, and they've agreed to pay €80 million for a release clause. That will make him the world's most expensive shot stopper, eclipsing what Liverpool paid for Alisson just last month. Kepa's arrival would likely free up Thibaut Courtois to leave for Real Madrid, the Belgian having entered the last year of his contract with the club. Speaking at a press conference after Rob Green starred in a pre-season penalty shootout win over Lyon on Tuesday, Sarri gave no clues as to the future of Courtois. He said, I don't know in this moment. If I don't know about Courtois, I don't know anything about Kepa, of course.
Yeah, good man. Got to keep the...
Nothing to do with him.
Got to keep the facade that maybe Rob Green might be my goalkeeper heading into a Premier League season going.
Well, they won a penalty shootout last night, obviously, and
Rob Green was great.
Rob Green was the hero, so green shoots for Chelsea goalkeeping is what I say.
There's more, yeah.
Yeah, Tiger Woods took a day off as he's resting his body as he continues to fine-tune preparations for the PGA Championship. The 42-year-old taking no chances. He's attempting to land another major title. He took Monday off as he helps to deal with inflammation in his back, a number of back operations that could have threatened his career. He also revealed that he's taking up to 3 ice baths a day to try and manage the inflammation. Well, in athletics, Thomas Barr will go for gold in the 400 metres hurdles finals at the European Championships in Berlin tomorrow. The Ferrybank runner finished second in the semi-finals last night. Phil Healy was seventh in her 100 metres semi-final, but says she will use that experience for the betterment of the upcoming 200 metres heats. While Carlo's Marcus Lawler in action in the 200 metres this morning. Emma Mitchell competes in the 10,000 later, while Robert Powell and Callum Bain both go in the heats of the men's 50 metre freestyle. That's at the European Swimming Championships in Glasgow. Also in action today, Brendan Hyland in the heats of the men's 100 metre butterfly. Mona McSharry back in action too in the heat 5 of the women's 50 metre breaststroke. And England cricketer James Anderson had a pretty forgettable trip to the golf course. The England bowler escaped major injury when this happened.
Oh no! Oh my God! Is that you? Is that you?
It ricocheted from the tree. Did it?
Smashed the tree and nailed him in the face.
Oh, is he all right?
I think he was fine.
Okay, here we go. Is the tree on the left or the tree on the right?
On the
Tree on
right.
the
I'd
right.
say. He just doesn't catch it clean.
Oh no! Oh my God.
No.
Is that you?
Maybe it's the fire tree.
Does he hit himself in the face of the club? I couldn't tell. Are you sure he didn't hit himself in the face of the club?
That was the ball.
We go one more time?
Oh, there could be a branch in the ground, Tommy thinks. Anyway, who knows? But that's not the only cricketer in the news at the moment. That trial is ongoing, and it sounds like he might be in a bit of trouble. Let's leave that one for the English course to decide. Not prejudice his trial. I mean, they're not paying any attention to us this morning on OTBAM, are they? Anyway, right, we brought you a clip earlier on. Here is the full interview. Owen sat down with the former Kerry boss, Eamon Fitzmaurice, for a wide-ranging interview last night. It's an exclusive piece for OTBAM. Enjoy.
All right, as you can see behind us, we're at the Boar's Head here in Dublin. A happy memory here for many a GAA person down through the years, I'm sure. And as you can see, Eamon Fitzmaurice joins me. Eamon, how are things?
Good on, yeah, thanks.
So 72 hours at this point, I think, since you stepped down as Kerry manager. What have those last 3 days been like?
They've been, I suppose, mad. I've been overwhelmed really by the amount of messages and text messages and phone calls I've got over the last couple of days from people from every walk of life, and thanking me and wishing me the best for the future. And on Sunday the players themselves organised to go out to my home place in Lixnaw, and the whole lot of us went out, and all the players were there, and the management and the backroom team, and we had a great day out. And it would remind you of maybe a Wednesday or Thursday after winning in All-Ireland, even though we hadn't, that there was a great energy there and there was a great camaraderie. So I enjoyed that, and it was a good place to sign off for me, I suppose. And on Monday then it was recovery mode and back to normality today.
I think Killian Young and Darren Sullivan both posted photos on Instagram, and I was trying to make out what pub in Clarny it was, but it was Lixnaw, you're telling me.
It was Lixnaw, yeah. I think that one that went out was the Dewdrop Inn. My brother-in-law actually runs it, and we were in Mike Quilters in the village as well, who'd be big supporters of the team always. So yeah, and it was something that came from the players. It was unprompted, and it was enjoyable. We had a great day out, and we had good fun, and we had good chat about the memories we had as well.
Yeah, it's the best time to do it, really. Like, what was it like initially on Saturday night in Clarny when you told the players in the dressing room?
Yeah, there was a lot of emotion, I suppose, because look, I knew this year was going to be my last year, come hell or high water. I was hoping that we'd be going out after winning the All-Ireland. I hadn't said that to anyone. The only one that really knew that was my wife, Tina. It was coming to a natural conclusion, and both for myself and for the players, I felt it was time to move on. And I just, after the game, I said I wasn't really going to have an opportunity to speak to the players again unless I brought them together specifically. So I felt it was the best time to say it, and it was the best place. It was probably a natural place to do it, and in a dressing room where we spend a lot of time together. So it was fine. I gave the lads the news, and that was it, and on we went.
At what point did you realise this year that it was going to be your last year?
I think maybe even this time last year I probably knew that, but when I spoke to Tim Murphy, the chairman at the time, after we had been beaten, that he was anxious maybe that I'd stay on for 3 years. I committed to that at the time, but we felt that we would review it after the year, and I felt that it would be a big ask for me to be there for 3 more years, from everyone's perspective, from the players' perspective, from my own perspective. And so much goes into it that there is a shelf life in it. So I think I had a realisation from early in the season, really, that to give it absolutely everything I had and to try and get as much as we could out of the season. But that, you know, I'd be happy to move on at the end of it then.
Yeah, because Tim Murphy kind of seemed shell-shocked afterwards, I think, from just, I wasn't in the press area myself, but according to a few of the journalists, that he didn't see it coming at all. So I guess you surprised everybody with the move on Saturday, but as you say, I guess you had to do it there and then because you had all the players and everybody there at that point.
That was it, and you know, like I said, I hoped I was going to be giving Tim that news Thursday or Friday after winning in All-Ireland, and it would have been a different conversation. But I feel for Tim and for the county board and for the county even that it's a good move, that you know, it just removes someone who's been there a good while. It'll give Tim the opportunity to put his own person in there as well, because Tim came in having taken over from Patrick O'Sullivan, who had appointed me. So that's good for Tim as well. He's another 3 years to go in his term. He's a great man, he's a great leader of the county board, and I think it's good for him to get his own person in there and at the same time have a bit of time to try and get it over the line as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We may as well get straight into it. The comments after the game, which I think everybody's been talking about over the last 48 hours, is the anonymous letters. It's extraordinary. I don't think anybody saw the vitriol reaching this level, to be honest. We thought it was, first of all, we thought people only wrote letters in the 1970s, that they're still writing them in the year 2018 is remarkable, but also that individual abuse would be targeted in such a way. Yeah, well, I think the letters thing has taken on a life of its own. I think I suppose it's important to clarify where the comment came from. Since I've taken over, I've got a collection of letters, so this is nothing new for me. This is happening going right back to 2013, and I've never mentioned this, I'd say, to anyone. I certainly haven't mentioned it in public before, because it's not something I take any notice of, really. I remember even a couple of weeks or a couple of months into the job, when I got the job in 2013, we started getting anonymous text messages that time about how badly we were going, and Patrick O'Sullivan was the chairman at the time. He was getting them. Darragh O'Shea was the trainer of the under-21s. He was getting them. Was it from the same number?
Yeah, all from the same number, and I was getting them. So we had a bit of a laugh about it at the time. I remember being on the bus up to one of the early league games. We lost 4 league games in a row to start my term, and this person was telling me I was the worst Kerry manager of all time, and this was maybe 2 months into my term, so the only way was up after that. But we didn't, you know, I haven't ever taken any notice of that stuff, because, as I said, it goes with the territory. Jack O'Connor got it, Pat O'Shea got it, Paddy got it, Mick O'Dwyer won 8 All-Irelands and he got it. So, you know, it's not something that I was ever precious about, but something that changed this summer was players, and one player in particular that got a letter, and it was more what was in the letter that was what annoyed me, and I felt it was gone too far. That the player was told in the letter to jump off a cliff and take 3 or 4 other players with him that were named in the letter, and I felt that was, you know, going way too far. And as I said, when it's coming at a manager, and the selectors got a few this summer as well, which was no harm for them either to get a touch of it, but when it goes to a player, really, it's gone too far. And the lads are amateurs, and I've been in the dressing room with a lot of those lads for 6 years, some of the younger lads for 2 or 3 years, and they're as good a bunch as you can meet. They're so dedicated and they're so committed to the Kerry jersey, it's unbelievable, and they're a fantastic bunch to work with. So I'd always defend them to the hilt, and I didn't like that, and I think that's gone too far, really.
Like, you obviously, you don't need to name the player here, but at what point of the year does this come in? Like, is it again kind of early in the league? Is it sort of strange?
No, it was during the summer. It was recently.
And it's obviously an extraordinary thing for anybody to put pen and paper to tell somebody to jump off a cliff. Like, how does the player react to that? I mean, like, there's
No, and to be fair, I didn't tell that player that I was going to discuss this or anything, and I wouldn't like to name him. Same fella. It was, to be fair to him, it was water off a duck's back, and it genuinely was, because sometimes in those kind of situations, particularly in that kind of a competitive environment, you can be, fellas can maybe project a certain thing, but they might be feeling something deep down. But this fella, it did knock a stir out of him. It didn't bother him. But I thought it was poor form, to be honest about it.
Well, that's the thing. Like, we're talking about projection there. You could perhaps, if you're going to sit down and write a letter, you might say, well, that fella's not going to feel it at all. He looks like a peacock walking around the pitch with his chest out. But you never know what a person is really like, what criticism they could really take to heart. And that's not criticism, that's hate mail.
It is, and in fairness, I think that, with regard to the letters I've got myself and the anonymous letters, I wouldn't go so far as to call them hate mail. There has been some of them that have been fairly vitriolic, but a lot of them, no, they wouldn't. They'd be more in the harmless variety of things, to be fair. They are anonymous letters and you wouldn't take any notice of them, but that would cross the line, definitely, that one that got the player. And, like I said, that's probably where that came from on Saturday night. I hadn't planned to say that, sure. but it came out, and I know it's taken on a bit of a life of its own since. From the management perspective, as I say there's no manager in the country that doesn't get some kind of a letter at some stage, and that's even club managers. So as a Kerry manager, you're not going to be precious about that. But no, I think it's definitely time to shout stop when players are getting very strongly worded letters like that.
Definitely. It's interesting that you've kept all that mail.
It is, isn't it? A psychologist would probably have fun with that. I'll probably have some kind of a burning session or something at some stage. But like I said, some of them were on the nasty side of things, but some of them as well, there would be suggestions about what we should do with the team and so on, and some of those.
Did you implement those suggestions?
No, not too many, to be honest, not too many.
It strikes me that you either A, have to have a very thick skin being Kerry manager, or B, build one up. Which column do you fall under?
No, I think I had it from being a player. As a player, we had great days, but we had tough days as well. And in particular, 2001, 2 and 3, we underperformed in big games. And as a group, we weren't fulfilling our potential at all. So we definitely developed a thick skin that time. And after that, again, thankfully, we were successful. But no, when you've played for Kerry, as long as I played for Kerry, and you go through the ups and downs, you develop that. And I think that's just my personality. It is the way I am. And, I knew going into the job, I had worked with Jack for 2 years as a selector, so I'd had a good taste of it. And you have to be ready for that. And there's no point expecting that it won't come, because it will come when there's a bit of turbulence.
Yeah, like it's an interesting dynamic. It's been talked about for years and years, the dynamic between Kerry players and the supporters, Kerry management and the supporters. Do you feel you went on a journey with the Kerry supporters during this managerial stint, that it was going very well, obviously 2014? At what point does it start to deteriorate a little bit, where we get to the point now where it's very well kind of discussed that there is not a happy relationship between maybe your management team and the Kerry supporters?
I think with the Kerry supporters, and it's very important to say this at the outset, there's a genuine cohort there, and they're absolutely unbelievable, and they've supported us through thick and thin. They've supported me through thick and thin. I've had a load of goodwill over the last couple of days, as I've said, and going into the championship this summer, you'll be meeting people. They're always very positive. Last year, after the disappointing Mayo game, there was a lot of disappointment in Kerry, but there was also a lot of positivity, and people were certainly very positive with me. So I think that can be overplayed sometimes, that there is a very genuine cohort, that everyone's kind of tarnished with the same brush. But of course, then there is a cohort that are hard to satisfy, and again, that's part of the thing, and it's there. But the thing I would say in relation to the Kerry supporters is that I think in Kerry we've more followers than supporters. That we've the cohort that support the team, that go to all the games, that are there through thick and thin. But then we've a lot of followers as well, and I think the best way to explain it is that I'm a Man United fan myself. I've been since I was a kid. Maybe not as passionate or as involved as I would have been when I was younger. Certainly since Alex Ferguson has left, probably not as much. I wouldn't have the same level of interest. But I would call myself a follower in that I would know, or I would have known everything that was going on, and you'd follow what was happening and the different rumours and the matches and whatever. But I wouldn't have classified myself as a supporter because I wasn't going to games. I wasn't, maybe once a year I'd get to Old Trafford or whatever. And I think it's the same in Kerry, that we've an awful lot of people, they're absolutely fanatical about the game and they know everything about the team and what's going on, and they watch the games, but a lot of the games they watch it on TV. I don't think they actually go to games. So I would say there's a difference between the supporters and followers, because to me, if you're supporting the team, you go to matches and you support them through thick and thin. And I think it's even an issue at club level that, I'd be going around to a lot of club games and the crowds are small. There aren't, a lot of people don't go out and they don't support their club teams. If there's a county championship weekend on and there's 2 or 3 games on that I'd get to, it's a lot of the same faces that you see in the different places, So I think, as I said, there's a massive, genuine bunch of supporters there, but a lot of people in Kerry are followers rather than supporters.
Why is that?
I don't know. I'm not sure if it's a societal thing, and is it maybe the way the game has gone? Is it people don't, maybe there's a bit of negativity around it? Is it entertaining enough? Even when we played Monaghan and Clonus this summer in the Super 8s, there was a big crowd there, but it wasn't sold out. And I would feel that if you're above in Clonus and one of the heartlands of the GA, Monaghan are playing to get into an All-Ireland semi-final, Kerry are coming up playing for their lives, you'd nearly expect it to be sold out, to be honest. Similarly in Killarney last weekend, I think there was 17 or 18,000 people. Again, it's an All-Ireland quarter-final in Killarney, and the way things worked out, it didn't work out for us, but you'd nearly expect it to be sold out. So I'm not sure what it is, but it's possibly a worry. Is it cost? Is it interest? Is it apathy? I'm not sure.
Did they expect too much?
No, I don't think they do. I think that's part of what makes Kerry what it is, that there is expectancy there every year, and I'd have never hid from that expectancy because we expect the same thing ourselves within the group, with the effort that we'd put in and with the players we have and with the way we try to do everything right. We expect to win the All-Ireland every year. Otherwise there isn't much point going at it. So no, I don't think so. I think that's healthy.
Yeah, just a couple of other things on the Kerry supporters and kind of your relationship with them, because you'll have seen it all. You mentioned your playing days there and how Jack got it and Nico got it, everybody got it. Paddy obviously famously spoke about it as well. Do you kind of analyse how you're perceived from the Kerry fans as opposed to, say, Jack and Paddy? Then do you think you got a worse time than the Kerry than previous Kerry managers?
No, I don't, to be honest, because I think you shut yourself away from it from the most part, because you have a job to do, and no matter what you do, even when you win in All-Ireland, there's going to be things about that All-Ireland that weren't quite right. It wasn't the perfect All-Ireland, so there's always going to be debate, and that's part of sport. That's in every sport, and that goes with the territory. So no, I'd never measure myself against how the other lads went on. It would be an interesting conversation if we all came together. All right, yeah.
We should make that happen. Actually, Power rankings, the hate that Kerry managers get sometimes. You mentioned getting criticism after winning an All-Ireland, and I was just kind of thinking about it, just about some of the incredible matches that Kerry have been involved in under your tenure, and I wouldn't like to have seen some of the vitriol being written if Kerry had lost the 2014 All-Ireland, because I presume you get criticised for the way Kerry set up that day, but it led to winning an All-Ireland. And conversely, if you look at some of the things you've got criticised for, and you've spoken openly about it yourself, say the 2016 All-Ireland semi-final against Dublin and the Paul Ganey off for Mark O'Shea decision, which you've spoken about as well in the past, it must make you think, God, I'm lucky I won the 2014
All-Ireland,
that criticism could have got very, very bad, and it could have happened a lot sooner.
Yeah, I suppose the only positive side is that I probably wouldn't have been there for 6 years then, but No, I think you don't. You can't think about that.
Sure.
What we do and what I've always done, and it was one of the things I would have been very strong on going into the job, is that I was going to be my own man. I was going to do it my way, and the mistakes that I've made, and I have made them, have been my mistakes. There haven't been someone else's mistakes where I've been listening to someone on the street or reading something in the paper and saying, do you know what, that's a great point, I'll do that. And the next thing it goes pear-shaped then, and you're kind of saying, why did I do that? So no, I was very definite in my own mind going into the job that I was going to do it my way. We went a certain way for the All-Ireland final in 2014. We won, so it was fine. You mentioned the Paul Geaney substitution. It was something we discussed beforehand. If it came to play, would we do this? We did it. We didn't win. It was a very narrow loss. I think that day, that was the main talking point afterwards, rather than we brought a new press that we hadn't done before, and Stephen Cluxton's kick out, who was obviously one of the best players ever in GA history, certainly the best goalkeeper, and we'd success in that. That wasn't discussed at all. It was all about the Paul Geaney substitution, and I think that and that's in sport as well. That's not just GA, that it's always the person that isn't there is the solution to the problem. So, and again, and I've said this, and I actually mentioned this to Tim Murphy after the game last Saturday night, there's one answer to all of it, and that's just win. And once you win, you can be questioned, but you have the result to back up your theory.
Yeah, the psychology after the 2016 game is fascinating, because you mentioned there rumbling Stephen Cluxton twice before halftime famously. You never got a crack at Dublin again in the championship after that, without kind of trying to push it into kind of a grim territory. It must be frustrating that you didn't get that crack, because even if you look at the league record after that, 1 win, 1 loss, 1 draw against the Dubs.
Yeah, it is. There's no doubt about it. I think last year in the All-Ireland semi-final, the first day, the drawn game, we were a point up. We had a free that could have been managed better. We turned it over. They went down the field, got the equaliser. We won the next kick out, went up, had a free to win it, didn't nail it, and missed out narrowly. And in fairness, we didn't play great either the first day in that All-Ireland semi-final, but we were very, very close to getting back into the final. In fairness, second day, we malfunctioned, didn't play well at all. And that was very disappointing, but it was disappointing not to get another cut at Dublin, because they are the standard at the moment, and you want to compete against them, and if you can beat them in Croke Park in a big day, you have a great chance of winning an All-Ireland, whether it's in a semi-final or a final. And it was one of the things that I certainly enjoyed, I'm sure the players did as well, that we did manage to beat them in a big game in the league final. And of course, it's only the league, and it was in Kerry, the league means very little, but to myself, it did. To myself and to that group of players, it did. It was only the league, and even if it was only a regulation league game and it wasn't the league final, beating that Dublin team in Croke Park, it's a hard thing to do, and we managed it that day, and we enjoyed that. I enjoyed that win. I personally enjoyed it, but unfortunately we didn't build on it, and we didn't build on it in the meantime, and we just have to take that in the chin.
How much time went into studying the Dubs? Because as you say there, Kerry want to win All Irelands every year. Dublin were the standard bearers. They still are the standard bearers. Was there a lot of conversations going on and a lot of hours spent burning the midnight oil trying to figure out how to beat Jim Gavin's team?
I think early in my reign, I probably spent a lot of time watching them. I was at a lot of their games when we weren't involved ourselves. If we trained on a Saturday and they were playing on a Sunday, jumped in my car a good few times and came up to Dublin and watched them. So we played them a good bit, so we were very familiar with them. But as time went on, then I think they were always there in the distance, or they were always in the back of our minds, or the back of my mind certainly, but it was always about the next step and the next step and the next step. And if you can get to a point where you're playing Dublin and Croke Park and towards the end of the championship, it's where you want to be. But like you said, frustratingly, this season and last season we didn't get there.
Yeah, just on the decision-making process over the last few years, and obviously there's been a few different backroom teams involved with you down through the years as Kerry manager. Was that a very collaborative experience? I know you've always put yourself to the forefront to take all the flack whenever it's there, that you always said the buck stops with me, but to what extent was it a collaborative experience? Was there a lot of conversations about what we should do, or was it kind of your ideas and kind of rubbing it off the lads sort of thing?
No, I think it was very much a collaborative effort, and it has to be. Like you said, when you're the boss, the buck stops with you, and we'd all very much feed into everything we were doing. We'd have debates, we'd plenty of disagreements, plenty of arguments. I would be very open-minded, and I would be open to persuasion in certain directions. But at the end of the day, then when a call has to be made, if we aren't unanimous, I'll make that call, and we all go with that then. And that's the way we've always operated. And I think it's the way you possibly have to operate, that there has to be someone making a call at the end. But no, it's very much been collaborative, and there's been plenty of good ideas from the other lads down the years as well. I've had good ideas, I've had bad ideas, the lads have had bad ideas, and that's the nature of management.
Who did you get into the most heated exchanges with?
Who's the most awkward one of the lads, so you're trying to ask? They all have their moments, to be honest. When you're looking at the fellas that I worked with, they all come across so nice. If I asked you now, I know who you'd pick. Who would you think would be the most awkward?
Well, it's hard to say, you know. I mean, after Mikey Sheehy had a cut at the Kerry fans earlier on this year, you'd probably have to say him.
Mikey knows his mind. Maurice Fitz knows his mind. I thought you'd pick Liam Hassett there.
Oh yes, I forgot Liam actually.
He certainly knows his mind. Diarmid, Cian O'Neill, all of the lads that have been involved, and Paddy Considine would be very strong-willed as well. But that's the way a selector has to be. You don't want someone there who's just kind of sitting down and agreeing with everything you're saying. You need people that are going to disagree, debate. And what I found about disagreements is that if you have an idea yourself and the lads disagree with you, if you have to argue back as strongly to convince them, you're nearly convincing yourself more, if you know what I mean.
Okay,
you're trashing it out that bit more. So no, I think it's very important and it's very healthy. And the big thing I had with my management team, and I think you possibly have to have it, is that when we came to a decision, then it was all of our decision, and we all backed each other, and wrongly or rightly, we went together. So that was very much it. And I think working with the lads over the last number of years, it's been a privilege, and we've had massive times, and we've had massive fun and laughs along the way as well.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Cian O'Neill there. Like, he paid you a glowing tribute in Clarny on Saturday night. Obviously, Tomás O'Shea wrote a fairly stingy article of him earlier in the summer. There seemed to be a bit of needle from Gooch as well in the Sunday Game studio as well. Obviously, their pundits, they've got to tell it as it is, and it was probably just honest opinion of his job with Kildare that maybe they weren't achieving what they could achieve, as we saw, like they did against Mayo in Newbridge. Was there any sort of legacy there of discontent with Cian O'Neill and some of the older Kerry players?
Not that I was aware of, to be honest about it. Cian was a huge part of our success in 2014. When I took over, I felt we needed to go a different direction, strength and conditioning wise in particular, and Cian is an expert in that field. The fact that he's also a football coach was bonus, and he brought a lot in both fields. But, you know, with regard to the 2014 success, without his contribution in the S&C front, we wouldn't have won it. So, you know, he was a massive part of our success. He's a fella I got on very well with. And, you know, I think he's done a great job with Kildare. And I think he showed over the summer in particular, when they reacted through the qualifiers, what they're all about.
Yeah, definitely. Just one last thing on the selectors. Did you ever consider getting Donny Buckley back in?
Well, no, Donny, to be fair to him, had been involved before I went back in 2013. So I felt the fact that I was coming back, Diarmid was coming back, we needed fresh voices as well that the players hadn't heard from before. And Donny then was involved very successfully with Mayo for, you know, the exact same length of time that I was involved with Kerry. So again, he's a fella I'd have massive respect for. It was actually me that said to Jack to bring him in first day, because I knew him through he had done sessions with us with Field Rangers when I was playing county championship football with them, and I thought his sessions were incredible, so I thought he'd bring a good bit. So it didn't work out afterwards, but he's a fella I could see involved with Kerry again in the future for sure.
Yeah, sure, he's back in the market. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. Just to round off then, I guess we got to talk about the future, because it is a bright future. Kerry football, I'm sure you'll agree, is in a better place than the senior team than when he took over. It was in transition. That transition period, there's light at the end of the tunnel. You can see those boys becoming men.
Absolutely, it is a very bright future for Kerry, and there's fantastic work being done at all levels from development squads up, and there's an awful lot of great people involved all the way up along, and they're giving their time voluntarily. And you know, I think that's one of the points of the Kerry job that's a funny one that I often come across, the amount of people that think you're being paid anywhere between 50 and 100,000 euro a year. It's
you're well down the scale, like from what I've heard.
Yeah. Oh, have you heard more than that? I wish. The funny thing about it, people say, but you're being paid, and you say, actually I'm not. I'm a volunteer. You're not paid for the Kerry manager's job, and it's always, how would you go away? You are being paid. And I think that probably comes from that there is a culture at club level, in particular in the GA, that any outside coach that comes in, they're being well paid, and that's a fact. That's not taking a leap of faith. That's a fact. And I think because of that, they're saying, well, if your man's getting paid whatever he's been paid for coaching a club, do you really mean to tell me the Kerry manager isn't being paid? But I'm not, and in fairness, most of the lads involved in the backroom team, they aren't either, and I think that's important, and it's something that means that Kerry can put their resources into the important things like developing players and facilities and so on. But no, as you said, the future is bright. I do think it is important, though, that when a new manager is appointed, that he is given time and space, and I mean real time and space, in terms of it may take a couple of years to get over the line. It will happen. But it takes time. It'll take time for him to find his feet. We have some brilliant young players coming through, but it's a big step up. A lot of them made a big step this year. It's another step to go again and, perform against Dublin and Croke Park, for argument's sake. So we need to be patient, and we need to really support the team and support the new manager, support his vision, get behind him, trust him, and trust that it'll come to fruition.
How good is this next generation of Kerry footballer?
There is a lot of very good players there, but I think I briefly mentioned this on Saturday night. I think as a county, we've probably oversold the minor success a small bit. The minor success is fantastic, and it's brilliant for those players to win minor All-Irelands, but it doesn't automatically transfer to senior success, and it doesn't automatically transfer from being a good minor to being a good senior. There's a lot of development to go on in the meantime. I won a minor All-Ireland myself in '94, and of that squad, I think there was only maybe 4 or 5, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that was the max of it, that went on and won senior All-Irelands afterwards. So it takes time. But there are a lot of very good players, coming through. They're great lads, they're very level-headed, they're ambitious, and they want to play for Kerry, and they will.
Yeah, there's some amount of names doing the rounds in terms of the potential next manager. I know between Lixna and Killarney and all that, you probably haven't had time to even reflect on your own time, let alone look ahead to who might replace you.
I leave that in Tim Murphy's capable hands now, but look, there's loads of great people in Kerry, and there's a lot of people who've experienced, there's a lot of people involved in the underage set up for the last number of years that know all these players as well. So there's a lot of very good people, and to be honest, I think, to be fair to Tim, the lads are going to take their time, make sure they get the right man, and we as a county then need to get behind that man.
Yeah, just to finish up then, in terms of the worldview of GA in general, it's always good to get your thoughts on it before you went into Kerry management. Your columns and stuff were always very interesting. Like, what is the single biggest thing that the GA has to fix in terms of the games at an elite level and even at a grassroots level?
Yeah, for me, at the elite level anyway, I don't think it would work at the grassroots level, but at the elite level, I do think the game needs 2 referees. I think referees need help. The game has become so quick, and there's so much going on off the ball, And by the way, I'm not saying that we're whiter than white in that regard. We're not. You'll push the limits to whatever you have to do yourself. But I think we need a second referee. And I know the minute that's muted, the GA say, "Oh, we've 2 linesmen on either side of him." But the linesman can give certain amount of help. But I think oftentimes what's forgotten is they're rivals of the referee other than on match day. They want to be inside in the middle themselves.
Good point.
And, you know, if a fella's out in the middle of the field and he's making a bit of a hash of the game, it wouldn't be human for the 2 boys on the side to be saying, geez, I might have a better chance of getting a big gamer in All-Ireland down the line. So I genuinely think that we need a second ref. I think we could embrace technology more, but that probably won't happen in my lifetime, but I think we could. And the other thing that I think the referees need a hand with is that I think they're behind the curve a bit in terms of the dark arts, as it's called. And if I was involved with the referees committee, what I'd love to see is 2 recently retired players or 2 recently retired managers, not myself, I'm definitely not putting myself forward for that job, in with the referees and advising them about what's going on, where the game is at. The reason I say 2 is that if it was, I don't know, someone, Derek McGrath, for example, that when Watford are being discussed, obviously he has to leave the room and the other manager or player is there to help the referees, to tell them what's going on and look, we do this here, we do that there. And I just think you'll get to a better point in terms of really cleaning up the game and getting the decisions right, because I think there's too many games where there's big decisions got wrong, and so many people put so much time into it at an amateur level. I think those decisions need to be got right, and I think if the referees got a bit of help, it would be a huge elimination of a lot of frustration for a lot of people.
Yeah, for all parties really.
All
fans,
parties, everyone.
Yeah,
It's just fair. All you want is a level playing pitch. And listen, when I was in charge in 2014, we got breaks, but in other years we certainly didn't get breaks. And you know, the argument is, oh, it balances up over a season. It doesn't really. I would prefer if it was balanced full stop, and then no one can argue. There's no excuses afterwards, because it was a thing I always tried to avoid, because I think when you come out and if you say something about the ref, it's like sour grapes. But there are times, it's a fact that there are times referees get things wrong and it can cost you big. And I think if we eliminated that, it would be a huge thing for everyone, like you said, for all parties.
Yeah, last question then. 6 years in the job, what's the lasting legacy of being Kerry manager on you?
On me, the way I look at it is I was hugely privileged. From my background, I come from Lixna, I come from a hurling area. We go from our side of the parish, we go over to Finuig to play football, because there isn't a football team in Lixna. For me to end up playing with Kerry was a massive achievement and something I really enjoyed. So to end up managing Kerry was something beyond my wildest dreams, something I would have never thought of. So I lived the dream. I'm quite secure with what we achieved while I was there. Would I have liked to have won more? Of course I would. But we had good days as well. I enjoyed it. I'm definitely leaving it, I hope, a better person, certainly a stronger person, and I wouldn't change any of it. I really, really enjoyed it, and it was an absolute privilege. And the next person that gets the job, they're in for some roller coaster ride, because there are highs, there's lows, but it's a fantastic experience, and it's something that I look back on and I cherish, and I'm delighted. And at the same time then, in my own life, I'm moving forward. You know, when we started in the job, there was only myself and Tina in our family. We've had a little girl since, Faye. Tina's expecting again in January. I've been promoted my job. I'm going to be a principal in September, which still seems very surreal to me. And there's loads of exciting things happening. So delighted with the time I was in charge, privileged to have been given an opportunity, and at the same time looking forward to my life ahead as well.
Well, you've left the job in a very good place. Congratulations and everything, and best of luck with the two big moments in your life coming up over the next 6 months or so. And the Amalfi Coast tomorrow, I understand.
That's it. That's it. A bit of sunshine and a bit of sleep as well will be required.
Well deserved. Thanks a million for your time. Much appreciated, and all the best in the future.
Thanks, Owen.
Yeah, great stuff there from Eamon Fitzmaurice. Always thoughtful throughout his tenure, and indeed before that, and I'm really looking forward to having him back as part of the commentariat in the world of GAA. Imagine having somebody like him to balance the crap that you get on the Sunday game from the Owlads.
Yeah.
Who's like, actually, I've been in a dressing room, I've won an All-Ireland as a manager, I've won an All-Ireland as a player, I've come up against this Dublin team, I've game planned for them, I've seen my team fail in the middle to do what we said we wanted them to do, and this is the reason it happens. Not because of some overarching desire I have to clamp down and make football bad, because I'm trying to win games, because that's my job as the Kerry manager. Like, I don't know, I think that having him injected into the national conversation again about Gaelic football is something that we can all look forward to. And look, I think the other thing that he definitely needs is credit for an amazing job. Like, when he took that team over, you could easily see a 10, 12-year period where Kerry lapsed into not being competitive or relevant. But they were relevant every single year. Like, every single year they were relevant. And clearly in the Super 8s this year, it was the first game that did for them as opposed to the rest of it.
Yeah, it is. Like, it was looking pretty grim at the very start of his tenure when he looked at some of the underage teams coming through, and he took quite a poor performing bunch of minors and under-21s and turned them into All-Ireland winners in 2014. They were the backbone of that team, allied, of course, with some of the older lads in Declan and Gooch. And I guess there was a second period of transition then when Declan O'Sullivan and Gooch and Aidan O'Mahony retire.
But like, even Declan and Gooch, right? He didn't have Declan and Gooch in their full health, in their pomp. He had, like,
2014, maybe Declan O'Sullivan.
Was he not standing up, or did he not have to fly up because his knees were so bad? And like,
yeah, that's true actually. But
do you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's not like you can stick Declan in there and go, you're going to play for 80 minutes today if this game goes 80 minutes.
Sure.
We understand that you're going to be fully fit and you're going to be able to go for the whole thing. They had to, like, mind his minutes. And with Gooch, just as they were kind of transitioning Gooch into this playmaker who was going to load the bullets for the full forward line, he does his cruciate and snaps it horribly, and like never gets back to a point where he can be the player that they needed him to be to beat Dublin, who were the greatest team of all time during his tenure. Like, that's a sequence of events that most Kerry managers wouldn't have been able to deal with and get the team to relevance, but he managed to get them to be relevant. So I think that Sean Moran's final line today in his piece was, history will be kind to Eamon Fitzmaurice. It should be.
I'd agree with that. I think it will be. I think after a bit of time, after the dust settles down there, a little bit, people will wake up to what actually was achieved.
Great interview, says Mary Toomey. Best of luck for the future, Eamon. Thanks. You've done an excellent job and set up a fine team for the future. The letters, not supporters. They've either mental health issues or Egypts. Hashtag OTBAM. Danny McGovern, crazy stuff. Paddy O'Shea, when he referred to the Kerry supporters being a different breed of animal and the trouble he got into, he was obviously right. Thanks, Eamon Fitzmaurice, for your honesty, bravery and football brain. You're a good man, and welcome in Laois anytime. That kind of behaviour has no place in the GAA, says Colin Callaghan. Good on Fitz for calling it out. Shocking, simply shocking, says Caroline Rua. James Gorman says Paddy might have been right. There's a common theme about animals and Paddy being right emerging across the text this morning. Lads, surely 3 years is enough time for a manager. Toll on personal and professional life far too great. That's without the hate mail and idiots and ditch hurlers. I do think that there's a benefit to managers coming out the other side if they can, like, use it to their own ends. Like, the ability to harness a disparate group of 19 to 35-year-olds who are the playing staff, and then the giant backroom team, the logistics involved, the mind space, the creativity, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's a brilliant opportunity for people to further their own personalities and abilities. You know, just on a personal level, there you can see what the attraction of these jobs is to the right people and to those people with that level of ambition. So I think that, like, you know, we shouldn't be discouraging brilliant people from getting involved in this.
Yeah, without question. It's also interesting to see what, like, being in such a siege mentality, which being a GAA manager is, doesn't end from season to season. That continues across winters, as we've seen over the last couple of years, even working in this industry, you know, kind of how guarded even some managers can be, even in the off-season. Players are a bit more loose, but like, you listen to that, like Fitzmaurice would be the first person to admit that he was always very guarded when dealing with media. Very, very helpful, very good to deal with always, but always guarded, you know, never let too much slip, kind of like Jim Gavin is. And like, just because Jim Gavin is the way he is, for example, in post-match interviews now, doesn't mean that when his time does, when he does eventually call it time in his double managerial career, that he won't be similarly as fascinating and all the things that he's learned to kind of bring to the discourse around it. And kind of coming back to the potential analyst that Fitzmaurice will be next year, like, I mean, these next 2 years, some of the insights he'll give on this Dublin team and this Mayo team and this Kerry team are fantastic.
Yeah, two final ones, quick ones for you. Jason McDonald says, fair play to Eamon for coming on to chat so soon after quitting. And Charlie Boyle says, such a genuinely honest interview by a true GAA man. It's sad he received the abuse as reported. He'll be around as a valued pundit. Now, let's move on, because we do have another treat for you this morning. They just keep coming. It's like public transport in Ireland. We're going to leave you with this today. Paddy Considine, the actor, director and filmmaker, joined Owen and Andy Lee last week for a chat about his brilliant film Journeyman, which is available to buy on DVD right now. Here's the trailer.
When I come back through that door, I'm still going to be champion of the world. I love you.
Matty? Ready? Let's get you home.
I want to.
Who is it?
That is your little girl. It's Mia.
Mia.
Do you understand?
No?
And nothing comes close.
We got married here. Do you remember? Do you remember?
Yeah.
You don't, do you?
And I want you.
Where are you, my baby? I feel so alone.
He needs us, mate. Big time.
Feels like there's options.
I love you so much.
When you call me home, I love you.
I want you.
I need you to come back now.
I'm doing the best I can.
What are you doing?
Training.
Who are you fighting?
Future.
Feels like there's options between you and me.
Okay, that is the trailer for Journeyman. It's out now. It's on iTunes. It's on Amazon. You can get it on DVD. It's Paddy Considine's film. And you'll have heard us talking about it with Andy Lee a couple of weeks ago on the show. Andy, you've been blown away by this film. We've all been blown away by this film. It's a brilliant piece of work. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that Paddy Considine joins us now on the line. Paddy, thanks a million for taking the call.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Well, the first thing I guess to say is congratulations. You've impressed Andy Lee. It seems you've impressed the boxing community, which I'd imagine is one of the hardest things to do with any boxing film.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that I was most afraid of, because you want to try and make it as authentic as you possibly can. And I know a lot of people in the boxing world, and I knew they'd be incredibly harsh critics of the film, but at some point, though, you've just got to let all that go and just tell your story, and you have to use a bit of license, bend a few things, etc. But the response has been fantastic, so I couldn't have asked for anything more from the boxing people. When such as Andy, it gets their seal of approval, and Adam Booth and people like that, then you think, okay, we did something right.
Paddy, the thing that blew me away about the film was just the amount of detail that you got correct. And it's one of the things that most boxing films, don't do. What kind of research did you do for the film, or how did you study for the film?
Well, I've been a fan of boxing since I was a kid, and been around sort of boxing people, and I'm a fan of the sport. So I'll there's lots of sort of watching press conferences and watching all the the 24/7s and behind the ropes and all that kind of thing. I'm a fan, so you just absorb all of that. And then with regards to the sort of the boxing world, I tried to make it as authentic as I possibly could. So when there's like a press conference, we got Mike Goodall to set it up. We got actual boxing press sat there asking questions. Francis Warren to be the promoter. So there's just this other level of authenticity to the film, like Steve Bunt's in the film playing himself. And I thought bringing in people from that world would somehow just make it more authentic.
Yeah, but I know that's kind of more the aesthetic, but even like when Jodie Whittaker goes to hug you after the fight, the fact that you pull away, I've had that experience myself. So, myself and my wife went to watch it, and I think we cried about 3 times each during the film. You know, we were emotional wrecks after the film.
Yeah, well, one of my best friends was a professional, Matt Gaylor, and he's kind of my oldest friend. So he you know, I know him and his wife. Known each other for years, so I know what would happen when he'd come home, and you know how he'd fight for a Midlands area title. Then the next day he's back at work and half of his tongue split and there's stitches in it and his plastering walls battered and bruised. So I'd sort of had some insight into the reality of boxing, really, and not just the stadium view of it all. Yeah,
like the dynamic between you and Jodie Whittaker on screen, it's unbelievable. It's so on the nose, and just. You wrote, acted in, obviously, but also directed. And how was that? Was that a challenge for you in terms of critiquing the performances of yourself and of Jodie, and trying to get something out of the performance, but also acting in it as well?
Yeah, I was definitely scared of it. I was definitely didn't want to act in it. I just come to the realization that I had to, oddly, and also I thought to myself, if this role was presented to you with somebody else making it, you'd do it, you know. And I realised that my only reason not to make the film was through fear, not to act in it, was just my own fears about the stress. Would I be able to cope with doing all those things? But actually, when it came to making it, everything just fell into place fairly easily. And I think, you know, because Matty post-injury, it seems a bit crass to talk about him as a character, but he is. And it was easy to get into that character, and I had a few little ticks and characteristics that got me into the part. So I was able to switch in and out of them quite easily. And really, it wasn't about watching what I'd done and critiquing it. You almost have to surrender all of that and just do it. And then with your other actors, you know, just pay a mind, make sure that they're all with you, just give them the odd note here and there that they need to steer their performances. But your job as a director is to create the atmosphere, to create the world that they can come into, to do their job to their best ability. And so being a director really is just about creating the tone of the piece and letting people know that it's safe. Okay, there's no mistakes. It's safe to go in there and just perform. And that way you create that intimacy. And I think that's what translates between myself and Jodie, is that kind of trust in the process. If that doesn't sound too stupid.
No, it makes total sense. And like, well, just to go back to the details, I just can't, like, the fact, I'm not sure where you found it, but you know, I've seen boxers who've had injuries and boxers who've gone on too long in the career, the kind of the tongue to the top of the mouth where every time he spoke, he kind of made this clicking sound. And I've seen that so many times in boxers who've gone on too long, and again, you nail it. You really did nail it. What, yeah, go ahead.
I was just with Sandy. I went to Headway in Henley, and I didn't meet boxers who'd been injured. I strictly stayed away from any boxers, because you know what it's like. And you've been in many gyms, and everybody in boxing has got a story. And I've actually been in gyms where people have gone, "Oh, you can make a film about my life," and everybody's got a movie in their life. So I stayed away from it, and my research was mainly with people who'd had head injury from car accidents and things like that. So I sat with them and observed their movements, and I noticed. And also, there's a documentary Russell Brand did with Eddie Kidd years ago, and that was a really good frame of reference for seeing the, you know, how injury impacts and how it, you know, affects the mechanics of your body and your behaviours and things like that. So
Yeah, well, it was not that it was a wise move, because people in boxing don't really like to talk about that openly. You know, it's kind of like the side or the dark secret, or you know, the dark secret in the family that nobody wants to talk about, because they know it's a risk that you take when you go in there, and it's an effect of boxing, but it's kind of brushed under the carpet. Mm-hmm. What about working with Brendan Ingle? He plays you. Unfortunately, Brendan Ingle passed away recently, but it's a real treat or pleasure just to see him in the film, and I'm sure his son Dominic is feels great that he's in the film and they can look back on it.
Yeah, well, I'd had a little bit of history with the Ingle gym. I'd been there in the 90s with Neville Browne when he trained there, and leading up to his fight with Frank Grant. So I'd had a little bit of history back then, and that was the classic time with Nazim in the gym and Ryan Rhodes, Johnny. I'd taken photos. So when I came back to it and shooting it in Sheffield, it seemed like the obvious place to go. And Dominic Ingle was brilliant. He trained me for the part and looked after me. I mean, to be honest with you, Andy, the training I was like 13 stone. So it was their job to get me down. And so there wasn't much muscle going on. It was just like...
Were you weighing 160 for the middleweight?
I think the lowest... I think I weighed in lower than that. I think the lowest I weighed in was 162.
Yeah.
You know, so...
fighting fit.
Yeah, they got me there. But it was brilliant, and it was great to use that gym with all its history. And then just one day, I hadn't cast the role of the dad, and I just spoke to my producer. I said, I wonder if we could get Brendan to do that. You know, it'd be amazing to get him in, and they were really up for it and pleased to do it. So it was a lovely touch to have him in there playing my father. Of course, we sadly lost Brendan, so it's a little bit more poignant, but it's nice for the family too. I mean, Brendan's a legend anyway. He doesn't need anything else really, but to have him in that film, it's great to just have that for the family and for us.
One of the things that really stuck out to me from the story, Paddy, and it's kind of what Andy touches on there, the subject matter that is not really taboo in boxing, but it's a negative subject matter. But I think even on a more elementary basis than that, the idea of a boxer being a sensitive human being is one that isn't often explored with any great depth. Quite often you watch a boxing movie and it's a butch guy beating up another butch guy, and it's all about masculinity and chest pumping and all this sort of stuff. Ultimately, though, boxers are human beings, and how much of a challenge for you was that to actually explore that element, to remove the masculinity of boxing for a couple of moments and to actually get a 3D version of a human being?
It's so interesting because that's something that I consciously wanted to do. I got tired of, and I don't know if it's where I am in the films I've made in the past, but I got tired of that idea of, fighters battling with demons and the ring being the place where that's kind of atoned for, and it's done. They did it in Raging Bull. It was beautifully done back then. I didn't want to make a film about a guy who was dealing with his masculinity. It wasn't about that for me, and I think it's what Andy said earlier. Somebody criticised me. They said Paddy Considine's not convincing as a boxer, and I'm like, that's because you don't know boxers. And they weren't from a boxing world; they were from a journalist world. And I'm going, Matty Burton's. I know, Andy, you somebody who still does carry yourself with class. When you were doing press conferences and head-to-head, you carried yourself with class. So yourself, Darren Barker, those kind of fighters that don't get into the trash talking. There's a silent confidence about them, and that's what I wanted Matty to do. If I'd have had a character in Andre Brighton and Matty Burton and they're at a press conference just at each other's throats, I've seen it before a million times. I just wanted to show a different side of the game, but it's not a rags to riches story. It's a guy who's he's the champion. He's got a decent house. He's looked after things. He doesn't really need to fight, but he does, because in himself he's saying, I want that sense of fulfillment within myself. I want to feel legitimate. And so he goes in and has this final fight. But ultimately, the film really is about those things that we choose to pursue, those baubles, those awards, those things that are ultimately are kind of, they're not the fulfilling things in our lives, they're meaningless. And the film is about the death of oneself and the birth of another, if I may. That's what the film's about. It's about the death of the ego. So you've seen the film, that scene in the river is about letting go. It's not about suicide, it's about letting go on a higher level. The belt goes, he loses the belt, and he's washed up, but he regains some of his memories, and he regains his sense of purpose. And then it's just fighting to get the things back in his life, and that's the people that he loves the most, and that's what the film ultimately, to me, was about.
Unreal. That's so powerful, Paddy. Thank you for that. Like, and it does ring true what he's saying, and that's why I'm so impressed by the film. With the question you asked and the answer Paddy just gave there, it kind of sums it up.
It does. Paddy just like kind of moving it into kind of like a wider sense around boxing, because like I'm very intrigued by like some of the stuff I've read about this, and you mentioned it there in your first answer, being a fan of boxing as a kid, and ultimately, does this come back to your love for boxing? Like, I'm not sure if I got this correct, but you started off as a photographer and you started photographing in the bare knuckle scene. Am I right in saying that?
Well, not strictly, but I started photographing boxing, and I was quite cheeky. I when I was in my teens, I kind of blagged passes to fights, so I'd photograph like Frank Browne fights and some of Naz's fights, you know. But I was there just as a student learning. But all I photographed was boxing and boxers. But then Shane Meadows grew up in a village with Bartley Gorman, who was a bare knuckle fighter. And so, and Shane made a really beautiful documentary about him. And I met Bartley through Shane and just started to photograph him. So I never photographed any fights particularly, but it was just, there were portraits and photographs of Bartley. I just think I've always had a massive respect for these people. As a student, I used to come up to London and I'd go to LIBA. I'd go to London ex-boxers meetings and meet Sammy McCarthy and Ronnie Cooper and Terry Spinks and photograph those guys. I just always loved the atmosphere, and it was amazing to me to see these guys who were much further down the line. They all fought each other, you know, they all had the lumps to prove it, yet they were just full of love and hugs, and I could feel that energy in the room. And I suppose I've always seen that side of boxing, the camaraderie, and I know it's a filthy sport, and I know, you know, the underbelly of it is dark, but I wanted to just make a film that was something that said something about the humanity of people like Andy. You know, do
you see a lot of parallels between acting and boxing?
I think I've used a lot of. I think boxing has helped me mentally. You know, I'm not a boxer, but I think some of the rhetoric, some of the attitude, that's definitely helped me do the things that I do. You know, it's helped me to get up off my arse. And I always say that I'm not a fighter. I can't smack my lips, but I have a fighter's mentality, and I think I got that through my father and through my love of boxing, you know.
It's very interesting. Like, I guess as well, the other line that really stuck out to me from early on in this piece is the fact that you didn't want to act in it initially. Like, it's your film. Is that from your own point of view as a person, or is that from your point of view in the cold light of being a director that you didn't want to be acting in it as well? It's because there's a kind of a conflict here. I'm not sure which side of your character kind of shines more in that decision ultimately that doesn't actually end up happening. You do end up acting in it, but what are you thinking when you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to act in this?
Well, I have a bit of a toil with acting anyway, you know. I've never been fully comfortable doing it. But it's just one of the sort of little demons you carry with you. But when I became a director and directed my first film, I was just, there was a part I could have played in it, and I didn't. I didn't want to act in my own films, and I make these big statements and end up kind of retracting them or backtracking a bit. But I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to have a definite presence as a director and a different one as an actor. To the point where in my first film, Tyrannosaur, I say a line to Peter Mullen off camera, and I was going to get that line dubbed because I just did not want any part of my physical self to be in it. But there was something about Journeyman. When I'd written it, I realised oddly, it's hard to say this because you're not equating yourself to an injured fighter in any way, but there was something about myself in that part, I think, when I wrote it. And I think my reasons for not doing it, because I thought about acting in it, and my reasons were all excuses, and they were all physical. It's like, oh, your neck hurts, you're too old, your neck hurts, your hip hurts, you're not going to do it, you won't cope, you'll break down halfway through, you won't be able to wear all those different hats. And I just realised that my only reason for not acting in it was fear. It was just pure fear, and fear's not a good enough reason. And so I just came to the realisation that I had to do it, and I realised that I'd actually written it. I write with people in mind, and of course I'd written it with myself in mind, and that's what the realisation that I came to. and acting in it as well as directing it, and that was just another challenge to me. It was just another door that I had to break through. I don't think I'll act in every film that I make, but this one I just think felt personal.
Yeah, it sounds like your decision to act in the movie was an act of defiance rather than an act of submission, and I guess that's what I was trying to say, that I wasn't quite sure what you're thinking, but it was an act of defiance. Would I be fair to say that it's proving to yourself that you're able to do it, that like this is possible, and like we can chat about this, but the kind of different mental dilemmas you've been going through, is that what you're feeling before you make the decision to act in Journeyman?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I think if something terrifies you, then you've got to do it. You've got to do it. You've got to go through it. And also, in amongst that is a sort of self-preservation too, as an actor and as a filmmaker. There's, like I said, if somebody had come to me with this part, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. And we think ego is the thing that inflates us, but your ego makes you small. It's your ego telling you that you can't do it, that you're going to fail. And you just have to meet that with truth. You have to challenge that in order to kind of diminish it in a way. So I have all this stuff going on in me that I have to sort of face. People call them demons or whatever, but I had to face that, if that makes any sense.
The way I was thinking about this film was your fight. You had to take it like a fight. Do you think you continue to act and direct in your own films, direct and act in your own films?
Maybe, Andy. Maybe. I think so. Maybe. You see, I think with Journeyman, I looked at it and I was so critical of it for such a long time, and I thought to myself, if you were just directing it, you would have got better coverage, you would have got better shots, you would have been on the outside more and been able to. I look at it and I think you missed a shot there, you missed something over here, an opportunity, just because you were so steeped in it. But I think that's the trade-off. I think if you're going to go that deeply into a character and direct it, maybe if I directed myself again, I might have just that better awareness of different things. But I was so steeped in the story. The story was God, that was the thing. And I just had to honour that. So you learn your lessons, don't you? And so if I did it again, I might direct myself again, but a bit more experience this time.
Yeah, like it's very interesting listening to all that and kind of looking at your career through that prism. And like ultimately, it's a very plastic thing to chat to every actor about Hollywood, to chat about the potential of going to Hollywood. And I think you've done 2 studio films, and it's clearly been a deliberate decision by you to stay in the Midlands in England, to not go to Los Angeles. And I guess, does that feed into the character you've just been talking about, that there is a certain sense of authenticity, but that's also allied with the fact that you've had to fight to continue as an actor, to fight and kind of stay true to yourself, that those 2 things are almost one and the same?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between if you're an artist, like I've been in a couple of big films, but there was nothing breakthrough about those roles for me. There was nothing about them that fulfilled anything within me. They were just a chance to work with some really great people. But my thing with Hollywood is it's not a nurturing ground, especially now. It's not a ground where they'll take an artist and nurture them through and, this is your second film, but, we're behind you on your third film. And I feel it's not that terrain anymore. And the last thing I want to give up is my voice. And I feel like here, even though I'm making films on a certain level within a certain budget, I get to keep my voice. I get to keep my choices. I'm not making films via a committee. I'm not in a room with 12 other people discussing why my character, walks in the door a certain way. And I'm not having those stupid conversations with people. That it's your work and you're in control of it. And I think when you spend a piece of yourself doing something, it just means that so much more. And some actors are just turns. They just act. And that's okay. They act. But some of us want to do a little bit more with our time here. And I think that's what I feel. I want the things that I do to mean something to other people.
Yeah, you can't really kind of put a price on the value that has in a career as well. I'm just going to ask one more thing before Andy wraps up. And when we set out in the office that you were coming on the show, Paddy, so many people were saying, ask him about this, ask him about that, ask him about Dead Man's Shoes or other things. Hot Fuzz, for example, is another thing we wanted to chat to you about. But it's just one thing that I want to wrap up on, and it's completely from my own bias as being a huge Arctic Monkeys fan. I wanted to ask you about Submarine, and I wanted to ask you about, I think you actually wrote the Leave Before the Lights Come On music video. So it's kind of sticking out to me when you look at this filmography almost. That is there a relationship with Alex Turner there that I haven't actually read about before?
I know Alex to say hello to, but I haven't seen him for years. So around that time, I saw him a few times, and like you say, I wrote the video. And but no, we're not kind of pals. I don't have his phone number. I'm sorry if I've disappointed anybody.
Paddy, thank you so much for your time. What's next? You're going to New York with the Ferryman. You're going to be on Broadway.
Yeah, we go to New York in September. Yeah, and it opens in October, so we'll be there in the middle of winter.
Brilliant. And any more movies in development? Your own movies in development?
There's things that I'm writing at the moment, and there's a book that we've had the option on for years, which is another boxing story, but it's an American story. It's called The Years of the Locust. It's a really great book. I recommend you both find it out and read it, by John Houghton. And we've had the rights for that. We're trying to get that off the ground, but that's a bit of a toil because it needs money to make it. But yeah, and there's other things that I'm writing. So hopefully next year I'll be directing something else.
We'll make sure to get our hands on a copy of that.
Paddy, thank you very much for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Everything kind of wander off into...
No, it was brilliant. That's what we wanted. The insight was amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks so much, Paddy.
Thanks. Hey, thanks so much. Yeah, brilliant. I hope I get to meet you.
Brilliant.
Next time you're in Dublin
again.
Yeah.
Thanks so
Cheers,
much.
man. Take care.
All the best.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.